This video is going to be about adding fractions, and fractions includes mixed numbers, so when you have a whole number and a fraction in a number. Again, just like decimals and just like integers, it's super important to be paying attention to the signs. So if they're positive and negative, 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 or positive and positive, it's going to change how you approach the problem. So in this first problem, 7/10 plus 1/10. The most important thing with adding fractions is that you're adding the same denominators, which means you're adding the same thing. So if I've got 7/10 and I'm adding 1/10, that's just 7 plus 1, and that's going to equal 8/10. Since they were both tenths, we don't really have to do anything. 7/10 plus 1/10 is 8/10. Now, we can simplify this. You can divide 8 and 10. You can divide them both by 2. And we can do that because 2 over 2 is 1, and you can divide it by 1. And that's going to equal 8 divided by 2 is 4. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the answer to this one is 4/5. Okay. Should have left myself some more room. This problem is 1/2 plus 3 1/3. Since this is positive and we don't have any negatives, we just are adding two positive fractions together, two positive rational numbers together. We don't have to worry about positive and negatives. But notice how these have different denominators. That has a denominator of 2 and this has a denominator of 3. We need to figure out how to make those be the same denominator. So I'm going to ask myself, what can I turn 2 and 3 into to make them have the same denominator? What can I multiply 2 by to make it something that I can also multiply 3 by something to get the same number? Which sounds confusing, but basically you're just trying to find the same number by multiplying the denominators by something. We've got to figure out what that is. So I know that 2 and 3 both go into 6. So if I want to turn 1/2 into a denominator, instead of 2 denominator, I want it to be a denominator of 6. I'm going to say, okay, well, I know that 2 times 3 equals 6. But if I do that on the bottom, I have to do that on the top. 1 times 3 equals 3. So now 1/2 is, our new problem is 3 over 6 plus 3, and we don't know what yet. We don't know what's going to go in this blank spot here because we have to turn 1/3 into a fraction with a denominator of 6. So, okay, so I've got 1/3, and I've got to think, what do I multiply 3 by to get 6? Well, 3 times 2 equals 6. So if I multiply the bottom, the denominator, by 2, I have to multiply the top by 2, and that gives me 2/6. So now all of a sudden I have the same denominators. Both of them have a denominator of 6, and I can now add these two things together. So 3/6 plus 3 and 2/6. Well, I know that I'm still going to have this whole 3. Let's see if we get a whole other number when we add the fractions. So 3/6 plus 2/6. Well, that's 5/6. So this answer is going to be 3 and 5/6, and there's nothing to simplify. So that is your answer right there. Okay. Now it does get a little bit more complicated when we're using positive and negative numbers that we're adding, and we still have to remember to change the denominators if needed. So here I notice one's positive, one's negative, and I also notice they have different denominators. I like to start with changing the denominators before I figure out what's going on with the symbols, with the positives and negatives. So I'm going to say, okay, can I turn the denominator of 5 into a denominator of 15? So I look and I go, okay, well, actually, I could turn negative 2/5. Yes, I could make that have a denominator of 15. And so to make that have a denominator of 15, I need to multiply 5 times 3 to make it 15. If I multiply times 3 on the bottom, I've got to multiply times 3 on the top, and that gives me 6/15, negative 6/15. So now what I've got, my new problem is negative 6/15 plus 11/16, or 15ths, excuse me, not 16ths, 15ths. And so now I've got the same denominator. So now the problem that I know my answer is going to have a denominator of 15, unless there's going to be something to simplify. So my answer is going to have a denominator of 15. But I need to look at this problem right here. Negative 11, or excuse me, negative 6 plus 11. So what that's like is, okay, if I've got 6 negatives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I've got 11 positives, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Should have left more room. And I'm canceling them out. I'm saying, okay, how many zeros did that make? That goes away, that goes away, that's a 0, positive, negative 0, positive, negative is 0. And I'm left over with, what's left over is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positives. So our answer is positive 5/15. Now, be careful because we can simplify this. If our answer is 5/15, we can divide both the top and the bottom by 5 to simplify, and that will give me 1/3. So your answer on this one is 1/3. All right, last one, you guys. I notice here that these two are both negative numbers. We're adding two negative numbers. So again, on a number line, if you're adding two negative numbers, and here's 0, you're starting negative. So you're starting maybe here at negative 2 3/7, but then you're taking away even more. So you're going to get even more negative. So it's kind of like adding the two negatives together and then remembering, oh, it's negative. I added them together, but they're negative at the end because I added two negatives. So we're going to use that strategy. And I'm trying to kind of figure out, okay, I know that the whole numbers together are, I'm going to kind of think about this as adding 2 3/7 plus 1 2/7, even though they're both negative, and I know I'm going to have to make my answer negative at the end, sometimes this just helps me think about it. So if I was adding the whole numbers, 2 plus 1, that would give me 3. And then I'm adding the fraction parts, which have the same denominator of 7, 3/7 plus 2/7, and that is 5/7. So there's our answer right there. And this is our answer, but I'm going to show you another way to find that answer. The other way that you can find that answer is if, I made a big mistake. And the big mistake that I made is that I did not remember to go back and make these negatives. Yes, I added together the negatives, but since they're both negative and we're getting more negative, you have to remember to put a negative in your answer. So I'm sorry that I made that mistake. Learn from it. The other thing that you could do is think, okay, well, if I've got 2 3/7 plus 1 2/7, oh my gosh. It's just like in the classroom when by 5th period, my handwriting is so sloppy. Okay, 2 3/7 plus 1 2/7. There we go. That's better. Now, that's the same thing. If I turn these into improper fractions, that's the same thing as 2 times 7 plus 3. So 2 times 7 plus 3, that's the same thing as 17/7 plus 1 times 7 plus 2 would be 9/7. You add together the 17 and the 9, and that would give you 26/7. And remember that all of these are negative. We're just adding them together because when you're combining negatives, you add the negatives together. So 26/7, you're thinking, how many times does 7 go into 26? 7 goes into 26 3 times, with 5 left over out of 7. And that whole answer is negative. So there's a couple strategies that you could have used on this one. And so be really careful of the negatives. Don't make the same mistake I made. If you're adding together negatives, don't forget to put the negative back when you're done. And try it on these guys, okay? Be paying attention to the denominators and the signs.